Hi everyone, my name's Gilly Carr and I'm the Academic Director in Archaeology at ICE. And today I want to talk to you about the archaeology of the pandemic. And this is something that I've been reflecting on as I've gone for a walk every day. And I think we're going to start off by thinking about what is archaeology? And in fact, how do things enter the archaeological record? Well, let's start there. There are three main ways in which things enter the archaeological record. Sometimes things are deliberately placed into the ground. So we might think of grave goods being placed with a body at the time of a funeral, or we might be thinking about ritual offerings to the gods, when things might be placed into the ground to please the gods. Of course, when people accidentally lose things, as many of us have outside, that's another way in which things enter the archaeological record. But also, people throw things away. And this is really where we get to the archaeology of the pandemic, because archaeology is not just about things that happened a very long time ago. Archaeology doesn't just deal with the ancient past and ancient objects. It also deals with the very recent past, by which I mean the present. There are people who study contemporary archaeology, which is about the archaeology of today. So if we think about the kinds of things that are thrown away as a result of the pandemic, these are the kinds of things which will fill landfill sites, which become incorporated as part of the archaeological record. Well, let me give you some examples into the kind of thing that I'm thinking about. So, for example, when I was going on my walk, I found a Starbucks cup.
Here's a Starbucks cup, and this has been here every day since lockdown began. And in fact, Starbucks, like all the other takeaways, have closed during lockdown. And of course, nobody's picking this up because we can't be quite sure about how long any potential coronavirus on this cup lasts. And so here it sits.
And every day as I went out on my walk, that Starbucks cup was still there. And it stayed there for about 3 or 4 weeks after Starbucks had long since closed because of the pandemic. And so this tells me something about human behavior, and which indeed is something that archaeology can do. It can tell you about human behavior. And the sort of human behavior we're seeing is nobody is picking up that cup, touching it, because they are worried that that cup might be infected with coronavirus. And so there's an unwillingness to be possibly contaminated. And so this cup stayed by the side of the road day after day. No one wanted to pick it up and take it home, because after all, we don't know precisely how long the virus stays on certain surfaces. So there are other sort of things that I commonly saw by the side of the road as I took my daily walk, and those included plastic gloves, the kind of disposable gloves that we're wearing in the supermarket. People didn't want to take them home and contaminate their homes. There weren't any bins nearby, so people have simply been throwing them by the side of the road after doing their shopping. I also saw an Actimel bottle, you know, one of those little bottles which contain healthy bacteria, the sort of thing that you see incorporated within yogurts. And these sorts of little yogurt drinks to boost good gut bacteria, and they're very good for immunity. So people are drinking these at the moment to try and be as healthy as possible during this pandemic. But, you know, I was seeing an increased number of these by the side of the road, showing that people were very consciously changing their behavior to start to eat things which are particularly good for them during the pandemic. But by the same token, you know, while we try and do things which are good for our health, we also take in things which are perhaps not so good. So, for example, I've seen an awful lot of alcohol bottles by the side of the road, and I think a lot of us are drinking a little bit more during this pandemic with a depression really about the situation and you know, what's going to happen in the future. But I've also seen a lot of chocolate bar wrappers. Well, I know I'm certainly guilty as charged as someone who's eaten an awful lot more. during the pandemic, during lockdown, as we reach for these sorts of comfort foods to somehow get a little bit of boost to our mood from the sugar rush from the chocolate. So there's been a lot of chocolate wrappers. These are all things which are going to be entering the archaeological record. And there were other kinds of things that I was seeing by the side of the road, such as takeaway boxes. Again, these boxes that people are using in restaurants and putting food in for us, and when we take them away, well, we know that other people have touched these boxes, and we're perhaps unwilling to take those into our homes because they might be contaminated. So these are the sorts of things that have been thrown away in greater numbers. And of course, there's been an awful lot of antibacterial wipes by the side of the road. And I think that even though we know that antibacterial wipes aren't effective against the virus, we're desperately trying to find any kind of household cleaning equipment that will somehow cleanse these potentially contaminated objects, which are now all around us, anything that we bring into our home. So really what I want to say is that if we think about archaeologists of the future who come and excavate landfill sites, they're going to be finding this sort of layer of the year 2020, and they will be able to analyze how we were responding to it in terms of our behavior, what we were eating, what we were drinking, how we were taking steps to try and protect ourselves. But also I think the landfill of year 2020 will be just full of so much plastic. And I'm sure you've seen, as I have, that in the supermarkets, where the supermarkets were before the pandemic, making efforts to get rid of the plastic coverings over everything, that has come back. Everything in the supermarket now is covered in plastic to protect the food. And so there is going to be such an increase in plastic of all different sorts in the archaeological record. Now, of course, we can reflect upon what survives well and what doesn't survive in the archaeological record. And we know that plastic really survives very well. So that layer from 2020 is going to be a fat one, and it's going to be packed full of plastic that will take a very long time indeed to degrade. So if what I've said about archaeology today has interested you, and you think that you might be interested to learn a bit more about this fascinating subject, then why don't you sign up for the certificate in the Archaeology of Ancient Britain that starts at the Institute of Continuing Education this autumn? And the first module is Introduction to Archaeology, so there's no better time to start studying with us.